She pressed her back against the cool wall, eyes scanning the polished marble floor for any sign of movement. Every step she took deeper into the rehab's heart was a gamble, a chance to uncover the truth about her sister, but also a step closer to danger. For days, Claire had pieced together fragments of whispered rumors and subtle glances exchanged by the staff and patients alike. Tonight, her patience brought her to a concealed panel behind the Grand Library's false bookshelf, a secret passage no one was meant to find. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the outline of the hidden latch. With a soft click, the panel swung inward, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. The air was stale, tinged with the metallic scent of old wiring and neglect. Claire's heart hammered as she flicked on the small flashlight she'd concealed in her sleeve. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a set of concrete steps curling downward. The distant hum of electrical equipment thrummed beneath her feet, promising secrets she was desperate to uncover. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a cramped basement room. Walls lined with filing cabinets and shelves bore stacks of manila folders, their edges yellowed and corners dog-eared. In one corner, a bank of monitors glowed with live footage, displaying various angles of the rehab's pristine rooms and corridors. The glow painted ghostly patterns on the peeling paint and exposed pipes. Claire's gaze fixed on the screens, each one a window into a world that was anything but the sanctuary the rehab pretended to be. There she saw patients speaking in hushed tones, staff exchanging envelopes in shadowed alcoves, and behind closed doors, meetings that reeked of conspiracy and control. Her breath hitched as she spotted a familiar face, her sister, caught fleetingly on one monitor. A wave of relief surged through her, tempered instantly by the cold realization of how deeply entangled her sister was in this web of deceit. The sister she thought lost was here, but trapped in a cage far more sinister than addiction. Suddenly, a faint rustling sound broke the silence. Claire spun toward the noise, flashlight beam darting across the room. From behind a stack of folders, a rat scurried away, its tiny claws clicking against the concrete. She exhaled shakily, but the moment had shattered her calm. Time was running out. Claire pulled out her phone, the camera lens capturing images of documents revealing financial transactions, patient records altered to hide disappearances, and correspondence implicating the rehab's leadership in bribery and intimidation. Every snapshot was a piece of the puzzle, every file a dagger aimed at the institution's heart. Her fingers moved quickly, but the distant echo of footsteps on the floor above made her pulse spike. Security was tightening. Ilias's presence was felt even without seeing him. Claire knew that this discovery would escalate the stakes. Surveillance cameras might soon be trained on her, and every move scrutinized. With one final glance around the cramped room, Claire carefully closed the files and slipped back up the stairwell, sealing the panel behind her. The opulent silence of the rehab enveloped her once more, but beneath its silk-smooth surface, a storm was gathering. As she rejoined the other patients, masks of calm and recovery firmly in place, Claire's mind raced. The truth was within reach, but so was exposure. To save her sister and dismantle the empire built on lies, she would have to navigate the tightening noose with greater cunning and courage than ever before. The game had changed, and Claire was ready to play it to the end. The glossy veneer of the rehab center was nowhere to be found here. Just raw nerves and fragile truths lay bare in the quiet hum of whispered confessions. Around her, the other patients shifted, each battling their own demons. But for Claire, the weight of her fabricated addiction felt heavier with every passing minute. Dr. Evelyn Marks sat opposite her, poised and clinical eyes sharp beneath thin-rimmed glasses. Her voice was calm, measured, but its undertone hinted at a deeper probing. "Claire, would you like to share how you've been feeling since your last session?" Claire's throat tightened. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed the lines and emotions she needed to convey to maintain her cover. But the truth was a tangled knot inside her chest. The fear of discovery, the exhaustion of constant vigilance, the gnawing doubt about whether she could ever truly find her sister here. "I've been struggling," Claire whispered, voice barely audible. Her fingers trembled as she tightened her grip on the silk scarf looped around her neck, the only comfort she allowed herself in this cold, clinical space. "Some days are harder than others." A faint murmur of empathy rippled through the group, but Claire's gaze darted nervously to Jasper. His lean frame was relaxed, but his eyes held a piercing intensity, watching her unravel with something unreadable, suspicion or amusement, perhaps both. "It's okay to be vulnerable," Dr. Marks encouraged, leaning forward slightly. "This is a safe space. Your honesty is important, Claire." The words were meant to soothe, but they only heightened Claire's anxiety. Vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not here, not now. Her breath hitched. The carefully constructed mask she'd worn since arrival threatened to crack, and the flood of emotions she'd kept tightly bottled surged forth. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, her voice breaking as the room seemed to tilt around her. I don't know if I can do this," she blurted out, the words raw and unfiltered. "I'm scared. I'm so scared." A silence fell, heavier than before. The eyes of the room fixed on her, some with concern, others with quiet judgment. Mara, sitting nearby, exchanged a brief glance with Jasper, her expression unreadable but sharp with calculation. Dr. Marks's face softened, her tone gentle but firm. "Thank you for your honesty, Claire. It takes strength to admit fear. We will work through this together." Claire nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. But inside, panic churned. Every second this facade faltered was another step closer to losing everything: her mission, her sister, and perhaps even herself. After the session ended, Claire retreated quickly to her room. The soft click of the door behind her a small refuge from the watchful eyes. She drew the silk curtains closed, the heavy fabric muffling the distant sounds of the rehab's controlled chaos. The dim light cast shadows on the walls, mirroring the turmoil inside her. She sank onto the edge of the bed, hands clenched into fists. The mask had slipped, and now the question loomed: could she gather the strength to rebuild it before suspicion took root and her carefully woven plan unraveled? Her phone buzzed silently on the bedside table, a message from an unknown number flashing: "Be careful who you trust. They're watching." Claire's pulse quickened, the stakes clearer than ever. The game was shifting, and she was dangerously exposed. But surrender was not an option. Not when the truth about her sister and the rehab itself was still buried somewhere beneath the silken shadows. Taking a deep breath, Claire steeled herself. She would face whatever came next. But the mask, fragile as it was, would have to be stronger than ever. Outside, the night deepened, the luxury rehab center, a glittering cage of secrets, power, and controlled chaos. And Claire was trapped in the heart of it all, with everything to lose. Her mission was far from over, and the cost of failure was unthinkable. The therapy room's sterile walls seemed to close in as Claire's breakdown settled like a storm's aftermath. Faces blurred with concern and quiet gossip, whispered theories about the girl who couldn't keep her act together began to circulate, some sympathetic, others laced with suspicion. Jasper's eyes lingered on Claire with a new edge, calculating and cold. Mara's sharp gaze followed, her lips pressing into a thin line, weighing the implications. Trust here was currency, and Claire had just risked bankruptcy. But Claire knew one thing with absolute clarity: the deeper she sank into this web, the more dangerous the stakes. And sometimes the mask must fall to survive. The question was, how long before the next crack would shatter everything? Claire closed her eyes, fingers pressing against her temples as she battled the rising tide of panic. Every heartbeat echoed the fragile balance she danced upon, a balance between truth and deception, hope and despair. Outside, the night whispered secrets through the rustling silk curtains. Inside, Claire vowed to keep fighting, no matter what it cost. The game was far from over, and in the shadows of the rehab, nothing was ever as it seemed. The hallway was deserted, the opulence of the rehab center swallowed in the late hours hush. She had followed the cryptic note, an anonymous tip that had found its way to her through a whispered conversation in the smoky drawing room, to this secluded wing of the facility. The scent of polished wood and faint traces of jasmine lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the tension knotting her stomach. Claire's eyes flicked to the heavy double doors ahead, their dark mahogany panels carved with intricate patterns that seemed almost to swallow the dim light. Beyond them, she knew, was the secret rendezvous, a meeting place reserved for the rehab's most influential residents. If there was a hint, a whisper, anything about her missing sister, it would be here. She adjusted the loose silk scarf around her neck, the fabric soft against her skin but heavy with symbolism. Silk was the veil that cloaked the rehab's true nature, smooth, luxurious, but concealing a web of power, games, and dark secrets. Claire had learned quickly to navigate this world, to blend in with the ultra-wealthy patients whose addictions were as much about control as they were about escape. The door creaked open slightly, and Claire slipped inside, sliding behind a velvet curtain as the room revealed itself. Soft light pooled from crystal chandeliers, casting fractured rainbows onto the polished marble floor. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and aged whiskey, mingled with the faint but unmistakable Thames of something metallic beneath it all. Anxiety, perhaps, or something more sinister. At the far end of the room stood Victor Langston, his tall frame silhouetted against the flames flickering in a grand fireplace. His silver-streaked hair caught the light as he spoke, his voice a low rumble that seemed to command the very air. "We all have roles to play," he said smoothly, eyes glinting with cold calculation. "The rehab is just the stage. The real game is power." Mara Jensen leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp beneath the low light, a silk scarf twisted nervously in her pale hands. "And the girl?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "The one who disappeared?" Victor smiled thinly. "A complication, but not a problem. Not yet." Claire's pulse quickened. The missing girl, her sister, was the complication. The pieces she had gathered over weeks began to fall into place. The alliances, the subtle threats masked as casual conversations, the disappearances quietly excused by staff and patients alike. Her mind raced as she crouched behind a heavy mahogany divider, the smooth surface cool against her fingertips. Every word she overheard added weight to her suspicions. This was no mere rehab. It was a front, a chessboard, where the ultra-wealthy moved pawns and kings alike, hiding behind their silken smiles, and her sister was a piece in their game. A sudden shift in the atmosphere made Claire freeze. Footsteps approached, deliberate, measured. Dr. Hammond's shadow loomed near, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the light as he scanned the room. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes flickered with suspicion as they swept over the dark corners. Claire held her breath, every muscle tensed. To be discovered here would mean the end, not just of her mission, but potentially of her life. Slowly, she backed away, the soft rustle of her clothing barely audible over the crackling fire and murmurs of the conspirators. Outside, the night pressed in, thick with secrets and danger. Claire knew the chase was far from over. Each revelation drew her deeper into the shadows, blurring the lines between ally and enemy, truth and deception. But she had come too far to turn back now. Somewhere in this labyrinth of silken lies was the answer she sought: the fate of her sister, and the dark heart beating beneath the rehab's gilded surface. The game was on, and Claire was chasing shadows that could either save her or consume her whole. She slipped away into the darkness, the echo of Victor's words ringing in her ears. The real game is power. And power, Claire realized, was a dangerous thing to chase. Claire's mind reeled as she pieced together what she had overheard. The alliances among the patients were more than mere social posturing. They were part of a larger, more sinister web. Victor Langston, with his polished charm and ruthless edge, was the puppet master, and Mara Jensen seemed caught between fear and defiance. Why was her sister considered a complication? What had she uncovered that made her a threat? These questions burned in Claire's chest as she made her way back to her room, the corridors seeming longer and darker than before. Her act as an addicted patient was becoming more delicate. The staff's eyes seemed sharper, the patient's glances more calculating. Claire knew she had to be cautious, yet she could not afford to lose momentum. The clues were finally surfacing, but so was the danger. In the privacy of her room, Claire pulled out a small notebook, her fingers trembling slightly as she scribbled the details. The rehab was a fortress of secrets, and within its walls, power was currency. Her sister's fate, tangled in this dangerous game, was the key to unraveling it all. But time was running out, and the shadows she chased were closing in. Tonight was just the beginning, Claire whispered to herself, steeling her resolve. The real fight is still ahead. Outside her window, the luxury rehab center shimmered under the moonlight, a beautiful prison of silk and steel, and Claire was trapped in its web, hunting for the truth that could free her or destroy them all. The night's revelations left Claire restless, her thoughts a tempest of suspicion and determination. She knew she had to play her part carefully, weaving through the controlled chaos without breaking her carefully crafted facade. Her sister's shadow loomed larger with every secret uncovered, the mystery of her disappearance entwined with the rehab's darkest corners. And as the sun threatened to rise, Claire prepared for the next move in a game where every step could be her last. The chase was far from over. The room smelled faintly of expensive cologne and stale coffee, a paradox of luxury and neglect that mirrored the rehab itself. She had waited for hours, listening to the muffled sounds of conversations drifting down the hall, until the coast was clear. Now, with the lockpick set she'd carefully concealed in her sleeve, she eased the drawer open and pulled out a thick folder stamped with the rehab's insignia. Her heart hammered in her chest as she flipped through pages filled with financial ledgers, coded notations, and encrypted messages written in a cipher she recognized from her research. A sudden creak from the hallway made her freeze. She slid the folder back and snapped the drawer shut, just as the door handle turned. Mara entered, her sharp eyes immediately narrowing when she saw Claire seated where she shouldn't be. "Looking for something, Claire?" Mara's voice was low and laced with menace. Claire forced a smile, her mind racing to fabricate a plausible excuse. "Just organizing my things." Mara stepped closer, her heels clicking ominously on the hardwood floor. Be careful where you poke around. Not everyone here appreciates curiosity. The warning hung in the air as Mara left, and Claire exhaled slowly. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground, but the secrets she was uncovering were too critical to ignore. Later, in the rehab's lounge, Claire positioned herself near the corner where the elite patients gathered, their voices low and guarded. She caught fragments of a conversation between Gareth and a sharply dressed man she didn't recognize. "The shipment moves tonight," Gareth said, his tone icy. "Make sure the ledger stays clean." The other man nodded, eyes flicking around the room. No mistakes this time. Claire's pulse quickened. These weren't just wealthy addicts. They were players in a high-stakes game of crime and corruption, using the rehab as a cover for their operations. That evening, under the fading glow of dusk, Claire met with Derek in the secluded garden behind the center. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and damp earth, a rare moment of tranquility amid the chaos. Derek handed her a small flash drive, his hands shaking slightly. "This has everything you need. Financial records, communications, even names. But be careful. They watch us closely." Claire nodded, the weight of the endeavor pressing down on her. "Thank you. This could change everything." Back in her room, Claire plugged the drive into her concealed laptop, eyes scanning lines of data that painted a damning picture. Money laundering, human trafficking, and a network that stretched far beyond the rehab's gilded walls. Just as she decrypted a critical file naming several high-profile residents, a sharp knock at the door jolted her out of her concentration. Her heart leaped. Who could it be at this hour? She swallowed her fear and moved silently to the door, the encrypted secrets burning in her mind. The game was no longer just about finding her sister. It was about surviving the deadly web of deceit she had just uncovered. Claire's resolve hardened. She would untangle every thread, no matter the cost. But with every secret revealed, the danger grew a dangerous dance beneath the silk that could unravel everything she fought for. As the night deepened, Claire stared out the window, the city lights flickering like distant stars. The rehab's facade was cracking, and she was right in the middle of the storm. The question wasn't if she would be caught, it was when, and when that moment came, would she be ready? Claire's heart hammered steadily, each beat echoing in the silence as she crouched by the mahogany desk, careful to avoid the creak of floorboards that would betray her presence. The dim desk lamp cast long, jittery shadows across the room, flickering faintly as if warning her to stop. Her fingers trembled slightly as they flipped through the sealed manila folders, scanning hastily but methodically for anything at all that might shed light on the dark undercurrents suffusing the rehab center. Minutes stretched and blurred together, the silence broken only by the faint rustle of paper and the distant hum of air conditioning. Then she found an encrypted USB drive hidden beneath a false bottom in the drawer. Her breath caught. This was no ordinary patient file. This was something else entirely. Claire slipped it carefully into her pocket, her mind racing with possibilities. But the quiet was shattered by the sound of footsteps, deliberate and slow, approaching the office door. Panic surged through her veins as the knob twisted. Dr. Evelyn Hart stepped into the doorway, her white coat, pristine eyes, sharp and unblinking. "Claire," she said softly, almost amused, "I wondered how long you'd last snooping around my office." Claire froze, the weight of exposure pressing down. Dr. Hart's calm facade cracked just for a moment, a flash of something colder. Darker before she smiled again, thin and unreadable. "You're treading dangerous ground," she warned, stepping inside, closing the door behind her. "This place isn't what it seems, and neither am I. The revelation hit Claire like a punch to the gut. The woman she had tentatively trusted, the figurehead of healing and hope, was hiding something far more sinister. Days later, Claire met Lena in the rehab's ornate garden, a sanctuary of manicured hedges and blooming jasmine that felt incongruously peaceful against the chaos inside. The night air was thick with the scent of flowers, masking the tension that hung between them as they whispered urgent words. "Heart's not just a therapist," Lena said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "She's involved in things that could ruin us all." Claire nodded, the weight of the truth settling heavily. Allies were few and fragile here. Trust was a commodity rarer than sobriety. Meanwhile, Marcus Lee, the security chief, lingered in the shadows outside the therapy wing. His presence was a constant reminder of the watchful eyes that guarded the rehab's secrets. The faint beep of surveillance monitors punctuated the oppressive silence, a soundtrack to the tightening noose around Claire's neck. With each revelation, Claire's mission grew more perilous. The facade of healing was a veneer, beneath which lay manipulation, deceit, and a darkness that threatened to consume them all. She had to tread carefully, for one misstep could mean the end not just of her quest, but of her life. As the chapter closed, Claire stared out of her window at the sprawling estate bathed in moonlight, the shadows stretching long and threatening. The game had changed. The enemy was no longer just hidden in plain sight. It was entrenched, powerful, and watching. And Claire knew one thing with brutal clarity. In this place, trust was the deadliest illusion of all.